A Snicker of Magic, Chapter 7. The one stipulation Aunt Cleo had given us when we showed up at the Sandcut Apartments complex with a dog and 3 grocery bags full of dirty clothes was this: we had to go to church with her. I could see in Mama's eyes that she wanted to take our hands and holler for biscuit and stomp right back to the pickled jalapeno, but something convinced her otherwise. I saw the words French fry floating through the hallway, and it's not because we craved them, but because we'd been eating French fries and service station nachos for weeks. The pickled jalapeno needed a rest, and so did we. So Mama said, fine. I'm sure she hoped God and Aunt Cleo would forget about our arrangement, but neither of them did. Cleo shuffled towards the pickled jalapeno that Sunday morning wearing a silky dress in a bold print of blue flowers and hummingbirds. The hummingbird wings looked like they were fluttering when the warm wind blew around us. But Cleo's hair didn't budge. Her hair was poofed up high onto her head like a stiff gray blonde haystack heap. The way you wear your hair makes you look old, Cleo, Mama said, and she added, it ages you, because I guess she figured Cleo didn't understand what old meant. Cleo didn't seem to care. Maybe because she was older than Mama. Cleo was almost 20 years older than Mama. Mama's hair was golden blonde, the way Cleo's probably used to be, but Mama still wore her hair long and wavy. Before we lived in Kentucky, Mama braided feathers into her hair. She always had paint in her hair, too, and she kept paintbrushes in the pockets of her jeans. She painted the ocean. She painted people's faces, but she hadn't painted anything in a long time. Mama's pretty blue dress tried to cling to the frame of her body, but couldn't find anything much to hold. Franny Jo was better at clinging. Mama kept Franny perched high up on her bony hip. Hey, Cleo, Mama shifted Franny Jo to her other side. Why don't we wait and go next week? If you could walk as fast as you talk, we'd be at the van by now, Cleo wheezed. She lit a cigarette and took a deep draw. Toss me the keys, I'm driving. Why are we taking my van? Mama asked. Church, it was your idea, remember? Because you think I'm a wayward soul. All of us can fit in your van, Cleo hollered. We won't fit inside the beast of burden. The beast of burden is what Aunt Cleo called her Nissan sedan. I didn't much think we fit anywhere, us Pickles or my Aunt Cleo, who tied a leopard print scarf around her neck before we pulled out of the complex. Cleo swerved the pickled jalapeno into the parking lot of the Friendship Community Church and turned off the ignition. She was already standing in the parking lot when she realized she forgot to put the van in park, so she had to open the door again and hop backwards through the parking lot on one leg, trying to jump back in the driver's seat. We stood there and watched while the van rolled backward and Cleo hollered, Stop, 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 stop. The pickled jalapeno finally did as it was told. Aunt Cleo left the van where it stopped right in the middle of the lot. She slammed the door, yelled out an unsavory word, and leaned over, clutching both knees to steady her breathing. You just gonna leave it parked there? Mama asked. They know we here, Cleo heaved. She threw down her cigarette, which she'd kept clutched firmly between her teeth the entire time. They don't care where I park. Hope they don't mind how we look either, said Mama. She brushed my bangs out of my face and said she'd get them cut next time she got paid, and she fussed over Franny's yellow tutu, which Franny'd insisted on wearing over her dress. Nobody cares how you look, Cleo said, heaving as she climbed the stairs, and I said you had a wandering heart, Holly, not a wayward soul. There were hundreds of words spinning through the church house, but they were so clear that I didn't see them at first. Then the light streamed golden and blue and red through the stained glass windows, and I saw the words plain. They shimmered like water. We had an entire ocean of words above us. Old words from the hymnals spun closest to me. Yonder, wayfarer, everlasting. Everlasting has a sound to it. Ocean water splashing over rocks. I whispered the word. I shivered because I liked the sound of it so much. Shh, Mama said, but she smiled down at me even then. She liked the way I cherished words. Then the woman sitting in front of us tucked her gray hair behind her ear. I saw a single word escape from her ear. Tired. So small I nearly missed it. Bold letters, though. The preacher at the pulpit wiped his forehead, and I saw a word leave his mouth that he never said out loud. Lonely. If only we could be more like the beetle, the preacher was saying. I sat up straighter in my seat. It's not that I'd forgotten Jonah's pumpernickel secret, but hearing the word beetle come out of someone else's mouth made me realize how special that secret was. And anyhow, I only knew the beetle's identity, not exactly what he did or why he called himself the beetle. The preacher said, "We need to follow the beetle's example, do good things for people without expecting anything in return." So Jonah's know-how was anonymous. He did a bunch of good for people, but he didn't want them to know who did it. That sounded 10 different kinds of ridiculous to me. My heart was right about my first friend. He was weirdly wonderful. "Let's close in prayer," the preacher said. I wondered if he knew how many prayer words had been circling through the room the whole time, even before he told us to pray. Help me, hold me, hear me, please. I looked down at my blue book, hoping from far off it might look like my eyes were shut. I wrote down some of the words I'd seen. I didn't hear much of what the preacher prayed until he said, "I pray that you know today how deeply you are loved, and I hope you take the time to pray for the ones you love. Tell them how much they mean to you this week. Your words don't have to be fancy, just sincere." So I gave my words to God without closing my eyes and without speaking a single one of them. Silent words, the kind a person's heart speaks. Turns out my heart had a bunch to say. I prayed for the beetle first. Then I prayed Mama might get inspired to paint something again. Next up was Aunt Cleo. I nudged her with my elbow and whispered, "What do you pray to God for?" "A man," she whispered. But then her whisper turned into a snort and then a snicker. And then she got so tickled at her own joke that the pew vibrated with the laughter she was trying to hold back. I didn't understand what was so funny. "You too," Mama whispered. "Hush, you're supposed to be praying." So I prayed for a man for Aunt Cleo, since that's what she said she wanted. I prayed for Franny Joe and for Biscuit. I prayed we could make a home here in Midnight Gulch, that Mama would settle into this place instead of driving us back out. I prayed for Roger Pickle. I prayed he'd write a song about me, maybe sing my name tonight when he sang down the stars. Maybe I would see my name spelled in galaxy dust and I would know he remembered me. And then the pastor said, "Felicity?" I gasped and my Mama glared at me, nostrils flared, thinking I was causing some silent ruckus, no doubt. But the pastor wasn't looking at me. His eyes were still closed tightly. His hands clutched the podium so hard his knuckles were pale. "Felicity," he said, "means intense happiness. The world is a sorrowful place, and we know there are kinds of happiness that don't last, that fade off, that leave us feeling wrung out and fickle." "Pickle," Franny Joe gasped. "They're kicking us out." Mama clamped her hand over Franny's mouth and pulled her into her lap. "But there are true, intense kinds of happiness," the preacher continued. "Felicity is a particular kind of joy, a wondrous joy. This week I dare you to choose joy." And then the preacher said, "Amen." "Amen," Cleo nodded. "Amen," Franny Joe echoed. And then she nudged me with her elbow and said, "Will you watch me do a backflip off the pew?" "No way," Mama answered for me. She grabbed our hands and hauled us towards the door, smiling sweetly at folks. The only thing Mama disliked more than church was pointless small talk. But we'd barely even stepped out of the pew and somebody reached for her arm. "Holly, is that you?" Mama nodded curtly and didn't object when the woman threw her arms around her and squeezed her tight like they were long-lost best friends. I thought she might scoop me and Franny up into a hug too, but she didn't. She just smiled down at us. I liked the way her red lipstick hugged her gap-toothed grin. "Made from scratch, ready to rise." Those were her words. "Girls," Mama rested her hands on my shoulder. "This is Ponder Waller. She owns the pie shop on Main Street. We went to school together." Before Franny or I could say hello, Ponder spoke up again. "I never met an artist more talented than your Mama. I always said she was a star. I knew Holly Harness was going to go places. Cleo's told us all about some of the murals you painted." "Cleo exaggerates." Mama grinned and prodded us on ahead of her out the door. "But thank you for the compliment. We got to get going." "You and the girls come by for some pie one day," Ponder said as we bumped our way through the crowd. "My treat." Mama never looked back, but I did. As she hauled us out the door, I saw my name, Felicity, shimmering across the stained glass window. I'd never seen my own name before. I never thought about how pretty it would look with the light shining through it. Tell you who's found their wondrous joy, said Aunt Cleo. The pickled jalapeno rocked us down the road while we dined on French fries and chicken nuggets. The beetle, she hollered, when none of us said anything. I stopped mid-chew. What about the beetle? Don't talk with your mouth full, Junebug, Mama said. Aunt Cleo took an extra big bite and said, with her mouth especially full, the beetle is a local hero, a do-gooder. He or she or it leaves notes on people's doors, flowers, and mailboxes, extra change in that one space downtown that has the meter. The beetle is always watching, always doing what needs to be done, has been for 50 years now. 50 years? I nearly choked on my French fry. That's impossible. That's magic. Cleo reached for some of Mama's French fries, but Mama slapped her hand away. And now I was more confused than I'd ever been. Because I knew the beetle wasn't magic, the beetle was that spiky-haired Jonah Pickett, and I couldn't figure out how the hayseed, a 12-year-old spiky-haired do-gooder, had been in business for 50 years. The beetle puts flowers on Abigail Honeycutt's grave, Cleo said. She nodded back towards the direction we'd come from, towards the church. The Honeycutts have all been gone for so many years now. I guess most of us had forgotten their story, or we decided not to remember it, which is very different, but every bit as bad. The beetle was the one who reminded us. One day, the weeds were pulled up and the kudzu was cut back, and there was a bundle of red roses settled against Abigail Honeycutt's grave. I didn't think Abigail Honeycutt had a grave, Mama said sadly. Her memorial, then, Cleo clarified. Then she looked back at me. That's too sad a story. We'll talk about that some other day. We let the sad quiet linger in the van for a time. Finally, Mama sighed and said, I can't believe the beetle is still doing those things. That doesn't make any sense. That's impractical. The beetle can't last forever. That's magic, I guess, Cleo said. She glanced up at me in the rearview mirror. What's got you looking so perplexed, Felicity Juniper? Of course, I couldn't tell them the beetle was my first honest-to-goodness friend, and he was only 12. So instead of answering Cleo's question, I said, Day Grissom told me to tell you hello. Mama let out a low whistle at exactly the same time Cleo said, Lord help us all. Is he still sweet on you, Cleo? Mama asked. Was he sweet on you ever? I asked. Cleo didn't answer either one of us. She pushed her big round sunglasses up her nose and said, Somebody pass me my cigarettes. And that was the end of it. Cleo didn't say another word until we got home, but Mama laughed. Day Grissom, some things never change. Mama's laughter sounded prettier than any word I'd ever heard. Franny was the first one to see the surprise waiting for us at Cleo's. Propped against the door was a box of dog treats, a coloring book, and a giant carton of Dr. Zook's called Hannah Banana Coconut. All three presents were tied up with a red ribbon. Mama read the note out loud. Dear world-traveling pickles, welcome home to Midnight Gulch. Sincerest regards, the beetle. God bless the beetle, Cleo laughed. Mama didn't say anything, but the smile on her face reminded me of the smile she used to have, her painting smile, her dancing smile. Magic. She picked up the box and carried it inside. There, in the hallway, I said another prayer with my eyes open and without speaking any words at all. I thanked God for Jonah, because somehow he'd managed to make Mama smile without even knowing her. I prayed I could give him something in return, too. Something as good as that smile and as pretty as the red silk ribbon he tied around the dog treats. I wished I could give him the word red. Red is a blooming word. I watched it rise up in front of me and sprout leaves and vines that stretched all across the apartment complex. Mama and Cleo and Franny didn't see it, of course, but I did. I picked an invisible flower and I tucked it in my hair.